Did you think you knew everything about the king of rock and roll? Could there be Elvis tracks that even die-hard fans have never heard? What if I told you that beyond Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock lies a hidden world of Elvis Presley recordings that rarely see the light of day? Elvis Presley recorded over 700 songs during his legendary career, but some have fallen so deep into obscurity that they've become musical buried treasure. These aren't just B-sides or album fillers. These are songs that somehow slipped through the cracks of music history, despite coming from one of the most documented and celebrated artists of all time. Number 1. Hot Dog. Ever heard Elvis sing about a hot dog? No, not the food. This obscure track has nothing to do with ballpark snacks. Recorded in 1972 during sessions for the Elvis Now album, Hot Dog represents a curious departure from the King's usual repertoire. The song features Elvis experimenting with a more contemporary sound, blending elements of country and blues with a peculiar lyrical structure that caught even RCA executives by surprise. Hot Dog was reportedly a favorite of Elvis himself during the recording session, with eyewitnesses claiming he performed multiple takes with unusual enthusiasm. According to Marty Lacker, a member of Elvis's Memphis Mafia, Presley was absolutely tickled by the song's unconventional rhythm pattern, which allowed him to play with vocal techniques he rarely showcased publicly. The song features an unusual time signature that shifts midway, something Elvis rarely did in his more commercial releases. Recording engineer Al Pachucki recalled, "Elvis kept wanting to go back and try different approaches. He was having fun with it, which wasn't always the case in the later sessions. There was something freeing about working on a track he knew wouldn't face the same commercial pressure." What makes Hot Dog particularly fascinating is its limited release history. Initially shelved after the recording session, it only appeared on an extremely limited promotional poem sent to select radio stations in the southern United States. Even more curious is how the song vanished from official Elvis catalogs for decades. Music historian Jorgensen Peter noted, "It's as if RCA collectively decided to forget this track existed. There's no logical explanation for its absence from comprehensive box sets and posthumous collections that supposedly contained everything." The song's arrangement includes a distinctive harmonica part played by session musician Charlie McCoy, whose contribution gives Hot Dog a distinctive blues edge, unlike many of Elvis's more polished productions. McCoy later mentioned in a 1998 interview with Guitar Player magazine that he had no idea the track had become so obscure. "We recorded so much material with Elvis that sometimes you forget what actually made it onto records. I remember that session though. Elvis was in a playful mood, really engaged with the material." In 2011, a collector in Nashville claimed to have discovered an alternative take of Hot Dog featuring an extended guitar solo, though the authenticity of this version remains disputed among Elvis archivists. The controversy around this alternate version has only deepened the mystique surrounding a song that even serious Elvis scholars might struggle to hum. The song's absence from major streaming platforms and official compilation albums has rendered it practically non-existent to modern audiences. Even more peculiar, former RCA executives have provided conflicting accounts regarding the master tape's location, with some suggesting it might have been mislabeled and stored incorrectly in the vast company archives. Number 2. Tomorrow Never Comes. What happens when the king covers an obscure folk song with existential lyrics? Could this be the most philosophical Elvis recording you've never heard? In the summer of 1965, between takes for the soundtrack of Paradise, Hawaiian Style, Elvis recorded a hauntingly beautiful rendition of Tomorrow Never Comes, a philosophical folk ballad written by an unknown noker from Minnesota named Timothy Hardin. The song's existential themes about the uncertainty of the future represented a striking departure from the beach-themed pop songs Elvis was recording for his movie soundtracks at the time. Session guitarist James Burton, who worked extensively with Elvis throughout his career, remembers the recording vividly. It was one of those magical moments in the studio. Elvis had found this song, nobody knows exactly where, and he came in humming it. He said he wanted to try something different, something with more meaning than the movie songs. The producers weren't thrilled, but Elvis was insistent. What makes this recording particularly intriguing is how it showcases a side of Elvis that fans rarely got to see during his movie years. A thoughtful artist engaging with deeper material. The track features minimal instrumentation, primarily acoustic guitar and subdued percussion, allowing Elvis's voice to convey the song's melancholy message with surprising vim and color. Recording engineer Thorn Nogar recalled, "Elvis did the vocal in one take. Complete silence fell over the studio. It wasn't the kind of performance we were accustomed to getting from him during that period. There was a maturity and sadness in his interpretation that caught everyone off guard." After recording, Tomorrow Never Comes mysteriously disappeared from production schedules. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's notorious manager, reportedly dismissed the song as too downbeat and not commercial enough for release. Parker's preference for upbeat, marketable material often clashed with Elvis's artistic instincts, and Tomorrow Never Comes became a casualty of this ongoing tension. For decades, the song existed only as a rumor among dedicated collectors. In 1992, a partial acetate recording surfaced at an estate sale in Memphis, confirming the song's existence, but raising more questions about why it had been so thoroughly buried. The acetate, containing approximately 2 minutes of the song before cutting off, sold for $18,000 to a private collector who has kept it from public release. Former RCA executive Joan Deary, who worked extensively on Elvis's catalog in the 1970s and 1980s, claimed in a rare interview that she had heard the complete recording during her tenure at the label. It was unlike anything else in the catalog, she said. There was a quality to his voice, a maturity beyond his years. It's a shame it hasn't been properly released. Music historian Ernst Jorgensen, who has overseen much of Elvis's posthumous catalog, acknowledges the song's existence, but offers a more practical explanation for its obscurity. Sometimes songs get overlooked not because of Eddie conspiracy. The Elvis archives are extensive, and occasionally recordings fall through the cracks. What little we know about the song's lyrics suggests themes of mortality and the passage of time. Subjects Elvis would explore more openly in his later recordings, but were considered commercially risky in the mid-1960s when his image was carefully controlled. This philosophical dimension makes Tomorrow Never Comes not just a rare recording, but a missing piece in understanding Elvis's artistic evolution. Number 3. Wooden Heart, alternate take. Could Elvis have recorded a German folk song that sounds nothing like his official version? Did the king secretly record an authentic Alpine version of Wooden Heart? Most Elvis fans know Wooden Heart, muss I denn, from the film GI Blues, where Elvis performs a charming, somewhat simplified version of the traditional German folk song. What few realize is that there exists an entirely different recording of Elvis performing this song with authentic German folk instruments and a much more traditional arrangement. In late 1960, while preparing for the official soundtrack recording, Elvis became fascinated with the original German versions of the song he had been studying. According to Joseph Lauter, a musician of German descent who was visiting Paramount Studios during this period, Elvis requested an impromptu session with authentic instrumentation. Elvis had been listening to records of German folk music to get the pronunciation right. Lauter recalled in a 1983 interview with European film magazine Cinema, he became genuinely interested in the traditional sound. He asked if I could bring in some authentic musicians, and the next day we had a zither player, an accordion player, and traditional percussion. What resulted was a wholly different interpretation than the one millions of fans know from the film and soundtrack. This alternate version features Elvis singing with a much stronger German accent, accompanied by traditional Alpine instrumentation. The arrangement lacks the pop sensibilities of the official release, instead embracing the song's folk roots with a slower tempo and more ornate musical phrasing. Sound engineer Bill Porter remembered the session as completely unofficial. Colonel Parker wasn't there, and neither were most of the RCA people. It was just Elvis and these German musicians working out this arrangement that had nothing to do with what was Plav, trying to sound as authentically German as possible. The recording was never intended for commercial release, but was made as a personal project for Elvis, who had developed a genuine interest in European folk music during his military service in Germany. By all accounts, only 3 acetate copies were pressed, one for Elvis, one for Joseph Lauter, and one that remained at the studio. The Lauter copy reportedly made its way back to Germany, where it was played at a small gathering of folk musicians in Munich in 1965. Attendee in music, journalist Friedrich Werner described it in his diary as astonishing the American king of rock, singing our traditional music with obvious respect and surprising authenticity. For decades, this recording was considered lost until a partial copy emerged in a collection of tapes purchased at an estate sale in Frankfurt in 2004. The recording, which includes approximately 3 minutes of the song before significant deterioration in quality, reveals an Elvis few fans have ever heard, one singing with careful attention to linguistic authenticity and traditional arrangement. Ethnomusicologist Dr. Helga Brauer, who has studied the fragment notes, what's remarkable is how seriously Elvis took the cultural aspects of the performance. This isn't a rock star playing it being German. This is an artist making a genuine attempt to honor the tradition of the song. His pronunciation, while not perfect, shows careful study. The official version of Wooden Heart reached #1 in the UK and performed well internationally, but this alternate traditional arrangement has never been commercially released. Elvis biographer Peter Gorilnik suggests this might be because it simply didn't fit the carefully crafted image RCA and the Colonel had established. An Elvis who sounded too authentically European might confuse the American audience. They were primarily marketing. Number 4. Blue Skies, Crying in the Rain. Has anyone ever heard Elvis sing a mournful country ballad while accompanying himself on piano? Could there be a recording that shows Elvis as a serious country musician rather than a rock and roll icon? In March 1969, between official recording sessions in Memphis, Elvis sat down at a piano in American Sound Studio after most of the crew had left for the night. With only engineer Al Pachucki and guitarist James Burton remaining, Elvis began playing and singing a slow, deeply emotional version of Blue Skies, Crying in the Rain, a country standard written by Fred Rose. Unlike the polished productions of his official releases, this informal recording captured Elvis in a rare, unguarded moment, performing purely for himself rather than for commercial purposes. James Burton recalled, "It was around 2 a.m. Most everyone had gone home, and Elvis just drifted over to the piano. He started playing these gospel-style chords, then went into this old country song. Al had the presence of mind to roll tape without making a big deal about it. What makes this recording particularly remarkable is that it features Elvis accompanying himself on piano, something rarely heard on his commercial releases where studio musicians typically handled instrumentation. His piano playing reveals influences from both gospel church music and honky-tonk styles, demonstrating musical abilities that many of his rock and roll hits didn't showcase. The vocal performance is equally revealing, with Elvis employing a lower register and more pronounced country inflections than his fans were accustomed to hearing. Session musician Bobby Wood, who arrived at the studio early the next morning and heard the recording, described it as pure country soul, like Elvis channeling Hank Williams, but with his own unique power. Engineer Al Pachucki recalled, "I knew we were capturing something special. Elvis didn't even know I had the tape rolling at first. When he finished, I told him I'd recorded it, and he just smiled and said, 'Well, I guess we got ourselves a song nobody's ever gonna hear.'" Elvis's prediction proved largely accurate. The recording was never submitted to RCA as part of the official session recordings, and Pachucki kept the tape as a personal memento of what he considered one of the most authentic Elvis performances he'd ever captured. In 1976, just a year before Elvis's death, country singer Willie Nelson recorded his own version of Blue Skies, Crying in the Rain, which became a massive hit. According to Elvis's friend and Memphis Mafia member Lamar Fike, when Elvis heard Nelson's version on the radio, he mentioned recording the song himself, years ago, just messing around at the piano. The recording surfaced briefly in the early 1980s, when Pachucki mentioned its existence in an interview with a music magazine. This created a stir among collectors, but legal complications regarding ownership of the unauthorized recording prevented its release. RCA claimed ownership of all Elvis recordings made during contracted sessions, while Pachucki maintained that the after-hours informal nature of the recording made its status ambiguous. Music historian Colin Escott, who claims to have heard a copy of the recording, describes it as a missing link between Elvis's country roots and his later, more mature ballad style. It's Elvis performing without any comment, something personal to him. The recording allegedly changes tempo several times, with Elvis stopping occasionally to work out chord progressions or try different vocal approaches, providing a rare glimpse into his creative process that polished studio recordings. This raw quality is precisely what makes it so valued by the few who claim to have heard it. Number 5. If I Were You. Ever wondered what Elvis would sound like singing a philosophical folk song with social commentary? Did the King secretly record protest music during the turbulent 1960s? In late 1967, amid the social upheaval of the Vietnam era, Elvis recorded what might be his most politically charged and lyrically complex song, a folk-inspired ballad called "If I Were You." The recording took place during an unusual late-night session at RCA's Nashville studio, with minimal personnel present and no official documentation in the session logs. According to guitarist Chip Young, who was present that night, the song came from an unexpected source. Elvis arrived with this handwritten lyric sheet. He said a young Yokener had approached him outside his hotel and handed him these lyrics. Elvis was genuinely moved by the words they dealt with putting yourself in another person's position, whether that's someone from a different race, social class, or even a soldier in Birm. What makes If I Were You particularly remarkable is its departure from Elvis's typical material. The lyrics explicitly address social inequality and the empathy gap in American society, controversial territory for a mainstream artist in the late 1960s, especially one with Elvis's broad appeal across political lines. The recording features sparse instrumentation, primarily acoustic guitar, light percussion, and subtle organ, allowing the lyrics to take center stage. Elvis delivers the verses in an almost spoken word style before rising to a more melodic chorus that repeats the refrain, "If I were you and you were me, how different would our visions be? Sound engineer Charlie Talent remembered the session clearly. Elvis was insistent that we capture the song exactly as he envisioned it. He kept saying, "The message matters on this one." I'd never seen him so focused on the meaning of a song rather than just the performance. The identity of the knocker remains a mystery. Elvis told the musicians only that it was a young kid with glasses who seemed educated. Some Elvis historians have speculated that the song might have been written by a known folk jokers using a direct approach to get material to Elvis, circumventing his manager Colonel Parker, who tightly controlled what music reached the king. After recording, the song vanished. Colonel Parker, upon hearing the politically charged lyrics, reportedly declared it commercial suicide and had the tapes shelved indefinitely. In the cultural context of 1967 to 68, with the country deeply divided over Vietnam and civil rights, Parker may have feared alienating portions of Elvis's diverse fan base. I sometimes wonder how his career might have evolved if he'd followed that impulse toward more message-oriented material. The recording has achieved almost mythical status among serious Elvis researchers and collectors. Former RCA executive Joan Deary confirmed its existence during her work, compiling Elvis's back catalog in the 1980s, but noted that the master tape had been separated from other session material and marked "not for release" in Colonel Parker's handwriting. Lyrics reportedly include lines addressing racial inequality. "If my skin were your skin and your life were mine, would justice look different when crossing that line? And class divisions, if my wealth were your debt and your struggle my ease, would I judge your choices when brought to my knees?" Themes rarely addressed in Elvis's "Come to My Knees." Music journalist Alana Nash, who has extensively researched Elvis's career, suggests that "If I Were You" represents the socially conscious artist that Elvis might have become if his management had allowed him more creative freedom. During the politically charged late 1960s, instead, he was making formulaic movies while his contemporaries were commenting on the rapidly chase. The song's existence reminds us that behind Elvis, the cultural icon was a thoughtful artist, sensitive to the social changes occurring around him. While we know the Elvis of Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto, "If I Were You" suggests a path his artistry might have taken if different forces had been guiding his career choices during a pivotal moment in American history. What other musical treasures might still be hidden in the vaults? Could there be an entirely different Elvis waiting to be discovered by a new generation of listeners? How would our perception of the king change if these obscure recordings suddenly became widely available?